Hello, I'm Noel, this is Antonia from Boxtail Soup Theatre Company, and this is another Boxtail Scoop. First of all, because we keep trying to say it at the beginning, if you've been watching these videos and enjoying them, please do give us a thumbs up, like, leave us a comment, or possibly even subscribe, that would be great. So this week, our table is quite bare. We have been doing lots of different stuff. We've been making all kinds of things. We've gotten on with the body for the bird that we saw before and the fish. We've given that a little tail. You've been doing loads of hair stuff. I made a big set of cardboard stairs. But what we've decided to do today, as we said last time, is to focus specifically on this little puppet here and just to kind of talk a little bit more about the process of making it and designing it and how it was put together. Because obviously it's quite different to the cardboard and papier-mâché ones that we're making. Now, apart from being part of the kind of discussions of design, I can't really take any credit for this one. This is pretty much all your work. So first of all, maybe should we just stand him up and have a little look at him again so we can see what he looks like. So he's got lovely, articulated arms, as in they've got a lovely range of movement. They can move as you would expect, really. And his legs are the same. He's got nice leg movement. And he does a nice little walk. Sorry, I didn't give you any warning that we were going to do that. And obviously, his head is articulated as well. He can move that around really nicely. So he's got a fantastic range of movement. So I guess the first fabric puppets that we made were for Wind in the Willows.
The Wind in the Willows, right? That's right, yes. Yes, and before that we hadn't really considered making anything out of fabric. We'd done papier-mâché, and I think actually, was that the first show we made a whole cast of bespoke puppets for? I think it might have been, because I think before that we were using our Northanger puppets and redoing their headpieces. So for Alice and for Midsummer Night's Dream and Man Alive, they were the same puppets but with different hair, etc.
Yeah, different hair, different costumes.
And although we might have made a couple of extra puppets for those shows.
Yeah, so what we were tending to do was to make one or two specific bespoke puppets for that individual show and then use the other ones again, yeah.
But then for Wind in the Willows, we were making a full cast of bespoke puppets because we decided we wanted to. I think we just grew in confidence a little bit, and we had a little bit more time. The show had been commissioned, etc. So we sort of decided we would try out using fabric. I think we had this conversation, didn't we, where we liked the idea that the main characters, Mole, Ratty, Badger, Toad, would all have a fabric miniature counterpart.
Yeah.
Almost like a soft toy that a child would play with and drag around with them. And
I think the thing that struck us about that story was there was a lot about the locations. So there was a lot about the wild wood or the riverbank, or where you needed to see a kind of the action from a wider perspective.
You almost needed to be able to zoom in as well and zoom out.
Exactly, yeah.
So we had us playing the main characters as humans, as it were, and then we had their miniature animal fabric counterpart. So when we went in the boat and that sort of thing, they could be the mini version of themselves. And we wanted them to look. The reason why we went fabric, I think, was that idea of it being like a soft toy, and for the kids to kind of want one when they went after the show.
Because that show has very much a kind of toy box feel, doesn't it? In terms of the colours that are used in the set and the props, and then you've got this soft toy.
So that was the first time I think we'd worked with fabric properly.
And you obviously had made a lot of costumes for previous shows up to that, so you had kind of begun to get more practiced and get more experienced at doing various kinds of sewing.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I mean, what's unusual about it is that it's often sewing without a pattern or any kind of guideline,
No, I'm a bit of a maverick sewer.
Yeah, and because you have to be.
Well, sort of, and I think also because I don't actually have any. I never learned how to sew, really. We did a little bit of sewing at school. I did some sewing in my costume and design course at university, which was just a module that I did. But I wasn't really taught how to do it. So it's very much kind of guessing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've never worked with actual patterns. I make my own patterns for costumes.
And some of the amazing kind of costumes and shapes that you're making, there is no pattern for, there is no, there's nothing to base it on, so you are very much...
I mean, I think some
making
kind
it
of
up as you
professional, real sewers would probably shake their head at me for the way I do it, because I don't measure things and that sort of thing. It's usually by eye, and I botch things occasionally, but they do end up looking okay, and they do the job for what we need them for.
But what I was getting at really was that it was at a point when you had made enough, even though we weren't making puppets out of fabric, you'd made enough other bits and pieces in costume, and maybe a little bit of a puppet's body or costume here and there where it had been stitched on or something, that we felt confident that
I could give it a go.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And then it was just very much the same kind of principle then I worked off, getting a pattern. I looked at a few actual soft toys and just tried to work out what pattern you would be using to make that, and sort of guessed really, and did all right with it. And then we've made a few fabric puppets since. So we wanted this guy. We weren't sure actually. He's a character that's going to be used for something very specific, and I did a drawing of him first, which you then had a look at and were like, yeah, I like this element, but I don't really like this element. And then we sort of had a chat with whether he was going to be made of papier-mâché or whether he was going to be made of fabric. And I think you said, I quite like the idea
that he's fabric.
Yeah. So then I had a go at making him.
So where, I mean, they follow the very, very similar format to the Wind in the Willows ones, because once we had figured that out and practiced it, it turns out that it worked quite well.
Yes,
there are certain little
the
elements.
monkey.
Exactly, yeah. So there are certain little things that I'll come to in a second that we've kind of kept on all those puppets. But where do you start then?
So for this one, I started, and I tend to start with the well, it depends, with the body. I started with the body for this one. I used the monkey that I'd made for Gulliver out of fabric that you saw a couple of weeks ago, and had a look at what shape that was. Quite liked the shape of it, so based the patterning of the body for this one on that one. And then I really do. This is made of an old sheet, so I wasn't too worried if I wasted a little bit of fabric if I got it wrong. So I did a bit of trial and error. But in fact, the body, I was pretty sure how I wanted it to look. I think the important thing with the body is I got the back shape first, because that's the basic shape that you want for the torso.
Is that one piece then?
That's one piece. And then the front, that is two pieces, and the important thing with that is it basically mirrors the back, except for these pieces are wider. Each individual one it gets wider as it goes down to give him a little bit of a tummy, otherwise he'll be completely flat. So if you make two pieces exactly the same as the back, just one piece like that and another piece like that, it's going to be relatively flat. But I wanted it to have this side profile of being a little bit coming out like a human would, to slightly have obviously it's not particularly human-like, but in that sense, giving it a bit of a tummy. So those pieces were then two wider.
And then presumably that gives you a sense of scale to start with, much like building any other puppet.
Yeah.
You then get an idea of what kind of size you're going to make the rest of it. So is the head then?
Yes, then I did start then I worked on the head, because you're right, once you've got what size the body, and we had a chat about that, didn't we, about what height we roughly wanted the puppet to be in the end. So then then it was the head, and the head for this one is just a ball. So you can find patterns for round spherical ball heads on the internet, and I had one anyway from ones that I'd made for Little Grim Tales, and it's just pieces that are petal shaped. So you want these kind of, they're like that, leafy sort of petal shaped pieces.
To me, if you imagine a beach ball,
yes, exactly,
with those patterns,
exactly,
that's how it fits together.
That's exactly how it fits together. So it's 6 pieces like that, then stitched together. And in fact, sometimes you then have to tweak it. When I first made something out of that pattern, it was the ball, the actual ball for Little Grim Tales, which ended up looking like a weird star-shaped kind of peach, which we kept because it was quite a fun shape. But it was because what had happened is I'd gone too wide in the middle. If you go too wide in the middle, it ends up being it has this funny shape. It has to be the right shaped, that has to actually be quite specific, otherwise it ends up going out funnily. You can tweak it then though afterwards if you end up with a bit weird.
And then he's got what I would consider relatively human proportions.
Yes.
But I find it interesting actually that even though
Slightly oversized head. Probably.
yeah, sure. I mean, it helps with visibility. So he's quite cartoonish in that sense. Yeah, the head and the body probably are less to scale or to proportion than the arms and the legs. But we talked about the arms and the legs and the length of them because again, when you compare them to the monkey,
yes, the monkey's got much longer
legs because you
and
need it to do that
well.
squatting thing.
Yeah.
And they're much thinner. So it's just interesting that it can make such a difference. It seems as though this is all in proportion, but actually you could give the puppet much shorter legs and put little feet on there and create quite a different
absolutely. There's
little character.
Loads of variety you can get out of a very simple pattern. So then the next thing was the legs and the arms, and they are literally a tube. So they're a long tube that then you stuff, and to get the joints you literally just stitch across where you think the knee would be or where the elbow would be, and that makes a bend in it.
Oh, so this is actually all one tube.
Yeah.
Right, and
in fact, if you make two pieces, you can make it two pieces, but I think it makes the joint over flexible. Obviously we then brace these joints anyway to stop them from bending the wrong way, and that's just a little piece of fabric, and you want them to sit at rest, you want them to sit slightly bent because then they won't ever go the wrong way.
And again, it looks more natural to me.
It does, yeah. It's
very slight bend in the arm, it's
and
not
a slight bend in the knee as well. But they're just one tube.
And are the hands, were they separate? Or
they're separate. Yeah. In fact, on the monkey with his lower arm, I made the paws, they were continuous. But with this one, I actually wanted to have that sense of a cuff there, the joint. You can't really see it very well. It was, I made basically like mittens.
But I mean, I think it's a lovely little detail, the little thumb. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, those are fiddly, those kind of things. He could have just had completely rounded off ended. You don't have to do something as complicated.
And then the legs presumably are also one tube.
Yeah, one tube stitched across.
And then the feet are a separate piece.
Feet are then separate, and that definitely they need to be separate, because in order to get this rocking motion here at the bottom, which gives him the nice walk, they have to be a separate piece. Mm-hmm. So I just drew out what I thought looked like the sole of a shoe, like a kind of cartoon sole of a shoe on some cardboard, and use that. And then in fact they've got cardboard inside them.
Right, yeah,
that's and I think they've got 4 pence worth of coins, so two pennies in there to give them a bit of weight so that when they land. Yeah,
and we often do that with, not necessarily just with the fabric puppets, but we often add a couple of coins here and there to give them weight in the right places, and often putting it in the feet. If you want them to walk, if they're going to be grounded, then it's quite helpful, because it does mean that their foot lands with a little bit more certainty and solidity.
It's a definite movement then, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Lovely. And then, as you were saying, they've got these little braces. That's something that we, again, use in all kinds of puppets, cardboard and fabric. But once we'd sort of figured that out, that it prevents that joint from moving in an unnatural direction, where the arm would bend back the wrong way, it's a really simple way of keeping that position right and making sure it only bends in that one direction. So you've got the same thing there on the back of the legs.
I think it's worth saying that's particularly helpful when you've only got, potentially you need the puppet to be at some points operated by just one person or 2 people, whereas normal bunraku puppetry would be 3.
Sure.
You might not have to worry quite so much about making sure that the joints at rest don't go the other way, because you'd always have a puppeteer on that limb.
And actually, when you're walking this one, the braces on the back of the knees are actually quite a nice place to
pick them up.
Pick up
and that's what we learnt that from the Willows puppets as well. We use the braces on their legs to walk them forward. Yeah. And then the
details, the hair and the eyes, that's just...
You can do what you like, really. That's just, I kind of wanted him to have... I drew him originally with a big pair of glasses, but you weren't sure about that. So we went for a sort of halfway house there where he sort of has almost like inverted glasses, because his eyes are on top of the mask here, the sort of ski masky type thing, which you liked from the monkey, which obviously is part of a monkey's appearance anyway, but they're a bit squared off. And then this is just fabric with card inside to make it stay upright, so it won't flop over. And then he's got a handle on the back so you can operate his head.
So you can see there's just a little, it's quite flush to the head actually, so you just tuck your fingers
and
inside.
that's actually something that's really important, and I learned from The Wind in the Willows, because when they're quite loose, it means that you have less control of the head, less you get less minute movement of the head if you've got them too far away.
Yeah, so you can
So
just sort of slide your fingers in there,
and
it stays nice and.
the
nice
neck
and
is
tight.
just a little bit of fabric, very carefully stitched to the front and the back, so that it doesn't move too much. It hasn't got too long a neck. You can choose that though.
How much of it is machine sewn, and how much of it do you have to hand sew?
So each of the head, all of the pieces of the head are stitched together on the machine. All of the pieces of the body are stitched together on the machine. You make the tubes on the machine, and I ran the machine across. So most of the component parts are all machine sewn, and then to stick them all together, they're then hand stitched.
Right.
So the arms are hand stitched to the top of the body, the hands are hand stitched here, these braces are hand stitched, etc. Basically all the bits that and you have to finish off the ball head by hand stitching it.
And
you
the
have to
hair,
obviously
things
close
like
up any
that, does
holes.
that have to be?
No, that was all machine
Oh, really?
stitched and then hand stitched onto the head. Yeah. If you don't have a sewing machine though, you could definitely make one of these. You could do the whole thing by hand. You just have to be careful that you use the robust enough stitch for when you're joining all the pieces together, and obviously you stitch it inside out and then turn it out the right way before you then stuff it. And it's just got normal soft toy stuffing inside.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, I absolutely love him. I think he's brilliant.
I'm really fond of him.
Hopefully you agree as well. He's got a lovely movement. He's got a lovely little cute face, such a lovely expression, and yeah, it's going to be great. Obviously, as we said before, the project that we've made him for, we can't quite tell you what it is yet, but it won't be long. We're working on it over the next couple of weeks, and soon we'll be able to show you what he's actually going to be in.
So, I think that's all we've got for this week, but thank you very much for watching again, and please do all the things. Do like, subscribe, leave us a comment, ask any questions. If you'd be interested in having any sort of patterning for anything like this, if you want to give it a go yourself, then let us know. And otherwise we will see you next week.
Thanks.